I have no props. I was trying to come up with something for a prop for this, and I'm like, no, not really. I can't really think of anything. At least not at the moment. So, this next section of videos is going to be about some of the various miscellaneous kingdoms that we see throughout One Piece that, we don't spend, either the Straw Hats themselves have not visited there, or it is just a kingdom that we've kind of heard about on the periphery, in regards to the kingdom and the royals and such like that. So this video specifically is going to be about the former royals and deceased royalty that we've seen throughout the story. I will have the next video after this, I believe, is just about some of the other miscellaneous kingdoms that are currently / very recently in the story. That's where I will be talking about, what was the name of the kingdom? Lelucia, I think was the name of the kingdom. I don't know, it got blasted out of the water. Their king was a vampire and their princess was a bitch word that I'm not going to say this early in a video. This video is specifically going to be about some of the other miscellaneous kingdoms that we've heard about where the rulers are most definitely dead, or they are former royalty, as in they were dethroned, or something along those lines. And then I will have another video where I talk more about all of the different kingdoms and monarchies that we see at Reverie. And then I'm just going to have, the last one in this little mini-series is going to be about King Elizabeth II from the Prudence Kingdom, because we spend a fair amount of time with him in Dressrosa, and I like the man, so he's going to get his own video. So, going into this, I'm kind of going through in regards to order from what we've seen for the various some of these various kingdoms and such. So the first one is going to be the Levnil Kingdom. This is the kingdom that is associated with Noland. So this is a kingdom that was in the North Blue. 400 years ago is when everything happened with Noland. And then we know that more recently in the timeline of the story that, I believe it's Law and Corazon ended up there while they were trying to find, Law a doctor. They didn't stay there very long. Because that's in the North Blue, and that's where most of that flashback for Law takes place, is in the North Blue. And I will actually, I believe... No, I don't think I'm talking about Flevent in this one. I think I'm talking about Flevent in one of the other ones. So this one, in regards to the kingdom, is the Levnil Kingdom, as I said, and the king, and I'm going to butcher his name, and I apologize, is Aruyatayan. Sorry, the fifth. He is the very lazy and lying king of the kingdom 400 years ago. In regards to the history of the kingdom, we know that, Monkblot Norland came from there, and that about 400 years ago, he was this famous explorer from the kingdom, and he led these different expeditions all over the Grand Line and everything like that. We know he ended up at Dressrosa. We know that he ended up at various other places, and then, of course, one of the last places that he ended up was, of course, Jaya, where, of course, ended up being, that's where he met the Shantians and Calgara, and all of that stuff happened. So, of course, we know that he meets them, gets to see the city of gold that's there, fixes their, this devastating plague that's causing them all these problems, the tree fever and everything like that, saves them and everything like that, and then, there's a misunderstanding, and then, things are kind of fixed, and then he's, gonna go back to his kingdom, and then, get permission to then return to the island. And what happens is, of course, he returns, he gets back to his kingdom, to the Levnil Kingdom, where he then ends up telling everybody there about this great adventure that he went on, and talks about, the city of gold and the Shandians and everything like that. And the king, who I'm just going to refer to as the king at this point in time, because I can't pronounce his name, was very interested in this. So they decided to try to mount another expedition. But of course they need to get permission to do this, or they decide they should get permission to do this. So the king was at the Reverie that year, I'm assuming, and he, you know, appealed to probably not the Gorosei themselves, but like maybe to get permission to go here. And then 5 years after Nolan's initial interaction with the Shandians is when they return to Jaya. They arrive at Jaya, and they end up finding that Nolan finds that like half the island is gone. And they have like this whole, it's this harrowing journey. They start off with like 2,000 men and 3 ships, and by the end of it, they're down to like one man or like one ship and only like a portion of the remaining crew. And like the king there was a sea king that tried to attack, and the king was just crying in the background while Nolan saved them all from the sea king and everything like that. And Nolan's the one solving all of these problems and everything like that. And he did everything in his power to keep the ship afloat. And they arrive at the island, and it's just, they're gone. Half the island is gone. And we, of course, as the audience, find out that, this is because of the knock-up stream that sent that part of the island into the sky and into Skypiea territory, where then everything happens there that I already went over, and the Shandian chiefs and the gods and stuff like that, all of that stuff. I already went over that in the Skypiea section of these videos. Now, side note, I will point out the fact that there is the theory that, maybe it was something happened and they had been, like, the knock-up stream could have been caused by the ancient weapon 400 years ago that was, like, Uranus, but, like, we don't know how long, like, we know that they have the Mother of Flame now in Uranus and Uranus, but we don't know exactly if it is, like, can it be something that's, like, built back up even before then? Probably not. So, we'll have to wait and see. But, it could have been caused by that, could have not. That's why maybe it took a little longer for them to be able to, receive permission to go. Because they wanted to make it disappear, because they're like, this is an island that was associated with Joy Boy. And they have a poneglyph, so we know that there was, like, some association there with Joy Boy between, the ancient kingdom and Joy Boy probably, and the Shandians. We just don't know the exact correlation there. And, so what ends up happening is they get to Jaya, and then, of course, everything just, all hell breaks loose, because it's just like, only, like, 2 of the ships arrived, along with only 50 of the soldiers, including the king and Nolan, and, like, because so many of them died in the journey, because, like, the king was not letting Nolan do his job, and Nolan was probably at the end of his rope trying to keep even this many people alive. So what ends up happening is they get to the island, and of course half the island is gone. And therefore this leads to the king proclaiming Nolan has been deceiving him and is this liar, and, where's this golden city that you promised me, and everything like that. And this, of course, ends up leading to where Nolan is eventually sentenced to execution. Now, of course, we know, like, as the audience, we know that this is, like, not true. There was this city of gold here. There were the Shandians and Kalgara and Moose and, all of this other stuff. All these other, all of this story that happened there. We know as the audience that it's true, but of course, the king does not want to look like he was made a fool. And, they're sentencing Nolan to death, to execution, which, the way that they portray it is very similar to, like, the way that they kind of portray, like, Roger's execution. Where, like, Nolan even, kind of, like, in the books at least, in the Nolan the Liar book, it's like, it looks like he's, like, smiling as he's dying. But he's probably not, although if any other, if one of the other random people can say that, like, Nolan has the will of D, most people would be like, yeah, probably. He was this expedition having badass fighting botanist who introduced pumpkins to various places. So yeah. Nolan was awesome. And, so the king is like, we're going to execute you. And, like, Nolan tries to appeal to, like, his original crew to, like, have them, agree with him. And, of course, a lot of them want to agree with him, but they are silenced by the king and by the king's, forces. And then they have these fake crew members testify that no, Nolan's just a liar and everything like that. And of course, they have it all set up where it's like, oh, legally this will be fine because we have a priest here and you're not supposed to lie in front of a priest and he can hold testimony and everything like that. So this leads to Nolan's execution, along with a lot of his original crew like running to try to come to his defense, but they're all ordered killed as well by the king. So he insists that Shandia is real, that there is this, that, the Shandorans are real and everything like that, and that his friends are there. So he doesn't know where they went, so he thinks that it like sunk beneath the waves. I mean, it went up into the sky, so there's the waves of the White Sea, so there's kind of a similar thing there. But of course, this ends up being like the legacy of this king, and unfortunately the current legacy of Nolan the Liar, which hopefully will get fixed later on down the line, is of course the Nolan, Liar Nolan, the book. And of course, that book itself, describes the king as like actually the king was the hero of this, and that Nolan had just lied, and that the king was the one that, fended off the Sea King and led the voyage and everything like that to paint the king in the best light, which, I'm sure the world government was like, yeah, sure, that's fine. That works for our propaganda. Go ahead. And, the Gorosei at the time, who could be the same Gorosei that are around now, were like, yeah, sure, fine, go ahead, write your stupid book, I don't care. I don't care. Could have been the case. And taking care of all of that. And we know that, of course, Cricket, Nolan's descendant is, of course, Cricket, who we know, down the line is, setting off to, find everything else and determine whether or not his ancestor really was a liar, which he was not. Nolan was very much not a liar. And, that's eventually, proven. And then, of course, as I mentioned, in Law's backstory, we see that, when him and Roshinate are traveling all over the North Blue, trying to find this, trying to find a cure for him for the Amber Lead syndrome, what ends up happening is, of course, they end up at the Levnil Kingdom. And pretty sure Roshinate at least set one of their hospitals on fire before they left. So there's that. And we have not really seen anything else of the kingdom since then. At this last reverie, I don't believe we saw any current monarchy from the kingdom. So they're probably still associated with the world government, but maybe they've fallen out of favor with the world government a little bit, so maybe they're not invited to the reverie, or at least not this time around. We just haven't seen any of the current monarchy. We only know about the annoying king. And in regards to the little bit of trivia about him, his name, I will actually try to pronounce it again. Stupid name. Where is the stupid name? Aruyatayan, in Japanese ends up is kind of like this pun of, you said it was there, referring to Shandora's existence. It's like, you said it was there, so where is it? Type of a thing. So it's, it's a pun on that. Going from that, we go to another former royal, in this case, not a deceased one, but a former, or at least not deceased as far as we know, but a former royal. And that is Belit. Now, you probably don't know who Belit is right off the top of your head. But Belit is actually this former prince of this unknown kingdom who ended up becoming a pirate and was in Impel Down, and whose gender was inverted by Ivankov. So, he's the guy that shows up with the bazooka after, Ivankov's performance, that, Bon Clay gets to see, and then, he shows up and tries to, bazooka Ivankov, and it ends up being fine, and then Ivankov, stabs him and turns him into a girl. So, basically what we have here for his story is that actually about 15 years ago in the story, so about 13 years prior to what happened in the when this happens in, at that time, Belit's father had been this king, and we don't know the name of the kingdom, we don't know the name of his father, but his father had been a king and had ended up at the Kamabaka kingdom, which is, of course, the kingdom where Ivankov is, their queen, their monarch. the Kamabaka Queendom, and ended up there. And by the time he returned to his home kingdom, he had become an Okama. Now, there, Belit blames Ivankov for this. Oh, you turned my father into an Okama. You did something to him. It probably was just the king had been either repressing or hiding that side of himself, and then he went to this kingdom and ended up, being like, screw this, I'm going to live the way I want. Which is perfectly fine. And so he returns to the kingdom as an Okama. And of course, this just puts their entire family and their entire kingdom to shame because of this. And, it's this, they're, and for Belit is watching his father go from being what, he considered probably like this very manly and regal king into an Okama, which he finds disturbing. And it's, this horrible, horrible, great loss for the kingdom and everything like that. And everything changes. And I'm assuming he probably ended up getting dethroned at that point in time, depending on what type of a kingdom it was. We don't know if it was associated with the world government or not. That's never explained since we don't know the name of the kingdom. There is the possibility that, like, that kingdom is currently represented at Reverie by, like, has been shown at Reverie at this last one, and just has a new king or queen. We just don't know the name of the kingdom, and we probably never will. But what ends up happening is, of course, Belit then ends up having to become a pirate, and he doesn't like that, and eventually he is captured, and then he is sentenced to, life or whatever, and impelled down. So then once he's there, he ends up plotting his revenge on Ivankov, and eventually he hears that Ivankov is an inmate. Now, there's the possibility that, like, Ivankov was, like, captured beforehand, because we don't know the exact time frame that Ivankov was captured. So he may have been captured before Belit, and then Belit, kind of got himself captured on purpose and sentenced to impel down, so he was at least in the same spot. Or it could have been he'd been captured first, and then eventually he heard, like, through the guards or something that Ivankov had been captured. And so they're both inmates, and then what ends up happening is eventually Belit finds his way to level 5.5 in the, New Kama land. And he ends up, he shows up at New Kama land just after, Ivankov's, big performance that is, the reference to Rocky Horror and everything like that. And, Bon Clay is just like, oh God, I'm in heaven now. I've gone through hell and I'm in heaven type of a thing. And Belit shows up and he's got like this bazooka and he tries firing at Ivankov, planning to kill, Ivankov for like, you ruined my life, type of a thing. Ivankov, I don't even know who you are. You took everything from me. I don't even know who you are. And, Belit tries this and it doesn't work because, of course, Ivankov's pretending to be scared and just deflects the attack. And then Belit is just so irritated at this and tries shooting again. And eventually what ends up happening is just like, Ivankov just jumps at him and then, stabs him with, uses his Emporio Ona hormone, stabs it into the former prince. And then, is, much to Belit's shock, turns him all the way into a woman. And it's, we watch this happen on page and on screen. And Belit just, turns into this female. And it's just, like, baffled about what the F just happened. Which is fair. He may not have known specifically about Ivankov's powers. But it's fair that happened. That he's like, what the F just happened? Why am I a girl? What the F happened to my voice? And, Ivankov, offers, Belit, her, the chance to join him and join his followers in New Kama land. And Belit is just like, no, and like runs off embarrassed instead, which, again, is fair. It's like, I've been plotting for the last 15 years or whatever about how to kill you, and then you just block it, and then you just embarrass me the same way that you, like, did this to my father or whatever, and it's just like, no, I don't want any part of this, and runs off. Now, we don't see Bellet for the rest of the arc. We have not seen Bellet since. It would be interesting if we cut back to New Kama Land at some point in time, if there is like an Impel 2.0 breakout, and if we see Bellet and, Bellet has, joined, Bon Clay and joined the New Kama Kingdom and everything like that that's in there in, level 5.5. That would be a possibility. And if that is what happens, then cool. Oda remembered the character. In all honesty, Bellet is there to be able to demonstrate the power that Ivankov has. To demonstrate that Ivankov has this ability to, stab whoever they want and then, alter their gender. To whatever degree Ivankov wishes. She could probably do it. We know she can shift someone to male to female, female to male. We mostly see Ivankov do it from male to female, because we see him do it with a guard later on. But so there's that. So Bellet's just there as just like a demonstration of what Ivankov is capable of, and a bit of Ivankov's personality. So next up, another former royal. We have Avala Pizarro, or the Corrupt King. So I'm not going to do a whole section about everything we know about Avala Pizarro. I'm not doing that. That's not something I'm interested in. I'm interested in what his possible role is as a king. So from what we understand for Avala Pizarro is that, of course, eventually that he is this former king. We do not know the name of the kingdom that he is from. Again, could be something that's at Reverie now, could not. Could just be another random kingdom that may not have been associated with the world government. We don't know. But we know that it was in the North Blue. And he just ended up being this despot king. And, probably was horrible to his citizens and eventually was taken down. Now, we don't know how long ago he was sentenced and how long ago he was, overthrown. But, he's been thrown into level 6, which is, of course, where they send the ones who have done the most atrocious crimes. And it is effectively a way of trying to erase them from history. Hence why Crocodile's there, Ace, Bullet, if you want to go with what's in the, Stampede, all the, Katarina Devon, all of these other ones that we see that are now part of Blackbeard's crew, which is, of course, where, Avala Pizarro is now, because, of course, he's freed from level 6 by Blackbeard 2 years ago when they did the prison breakout. And so we see that. I guess it is possible, like just on the Bellet note, it's possible Bellet managed to escape, but again, we have not seen them. So we can't confirm that one way or another. But Avala Pizarro, he's currently part of Blackbeard's crew. He is, he's got the island, the island fruit. I was trying to remember the Japanese name for it. I don't remember off the top of my head. But he's got the island fruit. He got his rock skull face punched in by Garp. So there's that. But we, don't know anything else about the kingdom. I guess there's a possibility that it could have been associated with the Germa, because, that's where, the North Blue is where the Germa kingdom was. So there's a possibility that there's a connection there. Doflamingo could have been involved. That would have been interesting to find out that there's like a connected history there. But we're not exactly sure because we don't have any of that information. That might get revealed later on if we get some other additional information about Avala Pizarro, but we just haven't yet. In regards to some history about Avala Pizarro, he is based off of the Pizarro brothers, a family of 4 Spanish brothers who served as conquistadors to conquer the Incan Empire in Peru during the Spanish colonization of the Americas. One of their surnames was, his surname is Avalo, which is, Avalo may be based off of the Alvos family, which is just this prominent family from Renaissance Italy. During, the Middle Ages and everything, and into during the 15th and 16th century. And in Spanish, Avaro, another variation of that with the R's and the L's in Japanese, is also can be based off of that word, and that word in Spanish, avaro in Spanish, can be translated to miser, as in you're a measly miser type of a thing. Next up, we have the bourgeoisie kingdom, of the bourgeois kingdom, and that is the kingdom where Cavendish is from. So I'm going to talk about Cavendish a little bit. Again, not doing an entire thing about him, but I'm going to talk about Cavendish. So, the bourgeois kingdom is a kingdom somewhere in the Grand Line, and it is the kingdom where Cavendish hails from. So really the only thing that we know about the history of the kingdom is that, that's where Cavendish was born, and then eventually, once he's, all grown up, he is just admired and adored by all of the women of the kingdom because he's just so handsome and charming and everything like that. And all the women in the kingdom want to marry him, so they refuse to marry anybody else. And eventually the kingdom's like, okay, well, if we don't get rid of him and fix this problem, we're all going to die anyway because we're not going to have a labor force for the next 2 generations, if that. And we're just going to all die out. So that's not good. And what ends up happening is, so they banish/exile Cavendish. And they send him away with 74 underlings and a horse and 500 million berries for him to have. And he goes off and then he becomes a pirate. And he becomes part of the supernova generation. That's part of the generation just prior to Luffy's or prior to that, something like that. I don't remember if he was before Ace or between Ace and Luffy in regards to their, supernova generation setups. The supernovas of their generation. But of course, he eventually becomes a pirate, and now Cavendish is, of course, currently one of the members of, the captains of Luffy's Grand Fleet, of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. So there's not too much else there. We don't, it's the bourgeois kingdom, which is based off of, the term bourgeoisie, from French, that is, this describing this, new ruling class. And it is, this just reference to, because Cavendish kind of gives off European vibes as opposed to other kingdoms that give off, vibes of, South America, South American countries, or American itself countries, or stuff for Japan and China and some of these other countries. There's some of the countries that are based off of, European countries, and that seems to be where the bourgeois kingdom comes in. We don't know anybody else from the bourgeois kingdom. We didn't see anybody from the bourgeois kingdom at Reverie as far as we're aware. But I was counting up a list of all of the countries that we saw at this past Reverie that seemed to be represented, and I think I did the we know there's supposed to be 50 kingdoms in attendance, 50 monarchs in attendance, but I went through and I think I don't even know if I hit 30 for however many countries we actually got the names of them, and the names of the royalty that's associated with them. And then there were several of the kings and queens or so that we did not get the name of their kingdom. We got their name, but not the name of their specific kingdom. So we don't know. Some of them could have been associated with the bourgeois kingdom. It may not, or may be associated with the world government. It may not be. If it is, it may not be high enough in standing to be at the Reverie. Again, we don't know. So we get that. Next up, just this reference to, so I made reference in the German videos to the painting that is The Conquest of the Four Nations. And that is this huge painting that Judge has, that is him with his spear standing over the heads of these kings of these 4 North Blue countries that Judge supposedly defeated them and killed them and took their countries, as a way to help him rebuild his German empire. Because he can't just try to focus on actually being a good king and a good father. He's no, I must be a conqueror and a tyrant and everything like that. It's just, yeah, sure, yeah, good idea. Because that's gone so well. But what ends up happening is, we don't know the names of these countries or the names of these kings. We just know that these seem to be several that are associated with the North Blue. We don't know the exact time frame that this happens. We don't know if this happens while all of the kids are still like when they're like babies, toddlers, infants, or if it's like after Sanji, after they're all born or before that or whatever. We don't know. I mean, like, as is stated, it's like, they could have climbed over the north, the red line into the north, into the East Blue, taking care of stuff there, then eventually gone back to the, North Blue and conquered these ones, and then went somewhere else or whatever because of their snails. I do gotta admit, I like the Germa snails. I also like the giant Germa cat that drives the carriage. I like those. But we don't know anything else about these other kingdoms. We just know that, Sanji thinks that the portrait is tasteless. And, Reiju is just like, yeah, well, it demonstrates father's power. It's just like, well, father's an idiot. So take your pick there. Next up, we're going to talk about the prince that's at the sheep's house. That's in Big Mom's flashback. So when little Lin, not even 6 years old, shows up at the... shows up at the sheep's house, we find out that, because her parents drop her off on the island and everything like that, she shows up at the sheep's house and she meets Mother Caramel and, all these other children. And Caramel is like introducing her to the children and everything like that. And it's, we've got a fishman, we've got long leg, we've got long arm, and we've got this, this boy that's, this prince from another kingdom that was, exiled or whatever. Now, we never get names for any of the children that are at the sheep's house, except for, Lin. Now, it would be interesting if we ever ended up getting names for them. Someone may have asked that in SBS question, and, Oda may just chose not to answer it, or he may be waiting until later to answer it because it might be something that might get addressed later on. I know there were lots of theories that the children that had been at the sheep's house ended up being trained into like the CP0 agents that we see later on, like Guernica and Joseph and everything like that. But I'm like, I don't know, given what we see with Big Mom's flashback, that's an unlikely possibility. But what ends up happening is, of course, we're introduced to this young boy, and I went blurry again. Why did you do that? I didn't move that abruptly. So we're introduced to the young boy, and again, we don't know anything about him except that he's possibly, this prince from a kingdom. This is, 62 years ago. We don't know his age or the name of the kingdom or anything like that. There's a possibility it could be connected to, one of the population extermination games that the world government did or something like that. We don't know. But, of course, he's there throughout, getting to know Lin and being around there while they're still on Elbath. And then eventually everything happens with the winter solstice and the Semla and all of that stuff. And, everything that, happens there. We know that, eventually they have to end up moving to the island that would become Whole Cake Island because of what happens with Lin and her hunger pangs. So, like, all the other children are there during all of that. And then, of course, for, Big Mom's birthday, they make her, the giant, Semla cake. But we also just have these other bits where we have, them running around and having fun on the island, either on Elbath or later on the island that would be Whole Cake Island at the new sheep's house. And eventually, of course, for Big Mom's birthday, they make all of these Semla for her. And by the time she's done eating them, she can't find the rest of the children or Carmel. And, we as the audience kind of put two and two together. But, Big Mom hasn't quite figured that out yet. Or she's repressed that memory, which in that regard, I would not blame her if she did that. I would not blame her at all for repressing her memory, given the circumstances. What do you think of that, Boo? Should she repress her memories? I don't know. What does that mean? I don't know. So, we will probably never know what kingdom he was from. Maybe it'll get addressed later on. Maybe there's info about it and like just additional notes that Oda has that might get published later on after the end of One Piece. Or someone may ask about it in a Viver card. I just need to go through and write down a whole list of questions for like Viver cards for the SBSs for like minor characters and be like, hey Oda, what's the name of these people? What happened to them? What's the names of these people? And everything like that. But I don't know. So, and I believe I got one more left here. Let's talk about God Valley. So, we don't know that much about God Valley. We know that they had a king, and he is dead. So, the bits that we know about God Valley is that 38 years ago, it had been this kingdom in the West Blue that was unaffiliated with the world government. And that it had been set up for the human hunting competition or the population extermination game, whichever combination you want to call it, translation you want to go with, where the celestial dragons go to an island that is not associated with the world government, and they release a bunch of troublesome slaves, and, they hunt the slaves, and they hunt the residents of the island like rabbits. And they, go through and just exterminate them and have fun with it, which is horrible. And we know that, they end up on this island, which is apparently very abundant in natural resources, which they had also been intending, I'm assuming, to like try to harvest those natural resources after they got rid of the current people that live there. They were going to harvest all of those natural resources. We know they didn't get the chance to do that, though, because of everything that happens on the island at the same time, the island just ends up like disappearing. As far as we're aware, the island just vanishes without a trace. Or disappears without a trace. But, so 38 years ago, all this stuff happens. They are on the island. The celestial dragons are there. Saturn is there. Figureline Garling was there. And Garling ends up killing, he's the commander of, at that point in time, he's part of the God's Knights, and he ends up becoming the champion of the island, and he ends up killing the king. And then everything, all hell breaks loose. And of course, we know that the Rocks pirates are here, the Roger pirates are there, the Marines are there with Garp, and, Roger's there with his crew, and Rocks is there with his pirates, along, Big Mom and Kaido, and everything else is there. And we know that the end of this event, of course, culminates in, some of the things that we know came out of this event was, of course, Kuma getting his fruit, Kaido getting his fruit, Ivankov nearly becoming a dragon, which would have been amazing. Rocks probably dying. A bunch of celestial dragons almost dying, but ended up being saved by Garp. And everything. And Garp and Roger fighting against Rocks and his crew. Possibly there could have been some switching of sides in there with like Whitebeard or something, depending on how crazy Rocks had gone, depending on what we end up finding out about Rocks later on. In like a more detailed flashback. But, everything happens, and eventually, the island vanishes because it's just probably destroyed in all of the aftermath with everything that's going on. Between all of the different powers fighting all over the island, it just gets destroyed. The celestial dragons manage to escape. Kuma manages to save, I think, 500 other people, along with, Ginny and Ivankov and, a bunch of others that they managed to save that were probably a mixture of other slaves and possibly just citizens of the island. Manages to get them safe. So, he saved like 500 souls, which is a pretty good start given the circumstances that he was under. And of course, so that's one of the end results there. The other end result is that as the Roger pirates are leaving, they end up discovering that they, because they brought a bunch of treasure chests on board, because it's just like, yeah, of course. They end up opening the treasure chest, and inside ends up being Shanks. and who is, probably the son of Garling. And of course, so we have all of that. And, so that's how Shanks ends up with Roger. And, those are kind of like the, kind of the end result of this. We know that the population seemed to be, for the island seemed to be about 100,000 people. But we're not exactly sure. That just seems to be, I think, one of the numbers that's given at some point in time. And in regards to some other trivia about God Valley itself, is that its inspiration seems to be based off of the real world place known as the Valley of the Gods, which is in southeastern Utah, here in the United States, that have these huge landmark rock features that just form these amazing sculptures out of rock that are just, have been worn away and created by, erosion and nature and everything. And it holds a lot of religious significance for a lot of the indigenous people from the area. So that's kind of like this reference there. But there's probably also something there about these other people who believe that they're gods coming in and destroying the homeland of these indigenous people and hunting them. So there's probably some kind of commentary there in regards to how... American, in regards to how Europeans and European descendants, treated the Native American populations. And I'm not arguing with that at all because I agree that it was horrible. So there were some things that ended up being, these are the end results of what happened at God Valley. Shanks ends up with Roger. Kuma has his devil fruit. Kaido has his. The Rocks Pirates are disbanded. And, tons and tons and tons, almost 100,000 people are killed on this island for simply the joy of the celestial dragons for their own entertainment who want to slaughter a bunch of innocent people. So, yeah, no, bad. We'll probably get a little bit more information. It would be interesting to find out what other kingdoms were affected by this population extermination game or the human hunting game. I know there's the theory that, just go and find, most abandoned island in One Piece, and it's just like, well, maybe it was here. Maybe it was here. Maybe it was here. Gaimon's Island. The island of rare animals. There's a possibility there was a connection there. Go to the island that eventually ended up becoming Whole Cake Island. It seemed pretty deserted, so something could have happened there. Previous generations of celestial dragons, if they did it every 3 years or something like that, then it's for 800 years almost. And if they only stopped because of what happened at God Valley, there's a lot there. And it could be, correlations to other abandoned islands throughout One Piece that they just decided to use for, they're not associated with the world government. They've got a good population. Let's go and exterminate them. It's another form of cleansing. And then we'll see what information they have that would be useful to us. Or, crops or other natural resources or whatever. So that is what I have here for the deceased and former royalty. I will have the next video will be more about just some of the more miscellaneous kingdoms that the Straw Hats have either interacted with directly or have had, more major things going on in them in the story more recently, in regards to, timeline-wise recently. So that's what I have. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye!